I think that somewhere out there must have been a job lot of books which were the first in the series, and I've managed to get the job lot of books that were the second in the series. My name's Gavin, this is Genre Books, and this is the 8th of my bookshelf explorations stroke excavations. I don't have room for all my books. I don't have room to sort them out properly in one go. So I'm looking at these cubicle by cubicle and figuring out how I'm going to order books, how I'm going to present them to myself, and how I'm going to remember that I own some of these when they are hidden 3 rows back. Whilst I do that, in case anyone was curious to see what was in these shelves, it's an opportunity to just wave books at the lens. And the first of those today is A Heroine of the World by Tanith Lee. Now, this is a first thus, so this is the first printing of the paperback. I hope there was a hardback. But this is proof that you could do a fantasy cover in the late 80s and still have it look really good. Sci-fi next with Clive Staples Lewis. That's Hideous Strength. This is the third of his Dr. Ransom novels. So I've read Out of the Silent Planet. I have not yet read Voyage to Venus, and once I have read Voyage to Venus, this will be the next one. Fantasy sci-fi with Patricia Kenley's The Throne of Scone. So this is, unfortunately, the second book in the series, and I don't have the first. This is a sci-fi fantasy retelling of Celtic and Arthurian myth. So I think it was the last video, or the last but one of these bookshelf videos, that I showed anthology, all based around the castle in fantasy literature. Here is another in, I think, what must be like an occasional series, Enchanted Forests, and 25 tales of forests in fantasy. There are some names that I recognise. Catherine Kerr, obviously. Lawrence Watt Evans, Susan Schwartz, Lois Tilton, but there are some names that I don't know. Carolyn Long, Gregory Feely, Jenny Lee Simner. So there's some stuff to find out here, and I might find some new writers to me that I enjoy. Another exploration of Celtic myth through fantasy, and this time the first in the series. This is Catherine Kerr again, and A Time of Exile. Battered old paperback time, and Stephen King's The Stand, which I have not read, and I think this must be the abridged version because it's only 700 pages long. So this is New English Library from 1980. It's obviously been read, possibly more than once, but this looks like a job for March of the Mammoths, or Long Story Summer, or any number of events, let's be honest. Staying with Stephen King, and a slightly less battered paperback, so this time from Futura. This is Firestarter. And yet more Stephen King that I haven't read. This is Different Seasons. So a collection of novellas, including Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. I think that somewhere out there must have been a job lot of books which were the first in the series, and I've managed to get the job lot of books that were the second in the series. This is Crawford Killian's Red Magic, by the author of Green Magic. I don't know if I need to have read Green Magic to read Red Magic, but here we are with a pretty well preserved mid-90s Del Rey fantasy. An author that I will be honest I've not heard of before. This is Richard A. Canak, The Janus Mask, and this is a dark fantasy from the mid-90s. From 1969, this is the Nebula Award Stories, Volume 1, edited by Damon Knight. So for this we have, as well as the introduction, Roger Zelazny, James H. Schmitz, Harlan Ellison, Zelazny again, Gordon R. Dixon, Larry Niven, Brian Aldiss, and J.G. Ballard. So that is all winners as far as I'm concerned. A year before that book, there was also Beyond Tomorrow, so from 1968, another anthology edited by Damon Knight. Alan E. Nourse, Arthur C. Clarke, Robert A. Heinlein, Kate Wilhelm, A. E. Van Vogt, Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, Clifford D. Simak, Don A. Stewart, and Henry Kuttner. So again, another roll call of science fiction classics. One of my favourite science fiction pairings with The Space Merchants and Gladiator at Law is C.M. Kornbluth and Frederick Pohl, and this is a collection of short stories. This is the British version, and by British version what they've done is, this is the original paperback from Ballantine, and it's got 50 cents in the corner there, but for the British edition they've just put a sticker on it, so 3 shillings and sixpence. Sci-fi noir with Nick Corpon, Queen of the Struggle. From 1987, from Tor Fantasy, with a good cover, is Sword Point, a novel by Helen Kushner, and unusually for 80s fantasy, this looks like it might be a standalone. The 1978 Warner Brothers New England Library reissue of Jonathan Jake's The Asylum World. Annoyingly, number 3 in the sci-fi series. This is Lawrence James, Simon Rack, Backflash. More mid-90s fantasy and a little bit of a saccharine cover for Wild Blood by Anne Logsdon. Bright, cheerful and charming, hotly spiced with magic and intrigue. Not my words, but the words of Simon R. Green, the best-selling author of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. This next book I first read when I was probably 14, 15, got it from the local library. It was my first introduction to either Larry Niven or Jerry Pournelle, and that is Footfall. So when I saw the paperback for £1, I had a rush of sentimentality and bought it, and I will get to read it at some point when I have a little bit of time. So I have read a couple of Niven and Pournelle books in the last year. At the beginning of the year I read Lucifer's Hammer, and the thing about Niven and Pournelle books is that when they write them, I think they both write a book and then stick them together because they're all very long. That's not necessarily a bad thing. So Lucifer's Hammer was really good, and The Moat in God's Eye, which I read last year, was also really good. This is the sequel, The Moat around, different moat, see what they've done there, around Murchison's Eye. And I think in the States this is known as The Gripping Hand. Last year I also read, was it last year? Might have been last year. The first of the Wheel of Time books by Robert Jordan. Now I've got some of the others somewhere, but I've got a stack of them here, so this will be nice and quick. I saw all these in a charity shop and they were £1.25 each, and I walked away with a very heavy bag. The Dragon Reborn, that's volume 3. The Fires of Heaven. Lords of Chaos, Crown of Swords, Path of Daggers, Winter's Heart, obviously couldn't come up with a something of something title, Knife of Dreams, The Gathering Storm. Probably missing a couple, hopefully find them in these shelves. We'll have to plug the gaps for this series. We'll have to find a couple of months where I'm doing nothing else but reading Robert Jordan. I think that might drive me to distraction. Next we have something which is a recent pick from the tote bag of Mild Peril, and this was V by A.C. Crispin. I'm keeping this on the shelves because I want to read It Can't Happen Here, and look at those books in tandem. This next book is an odd one. This is Welcome to Mars, Politics, Pop Culture, and Weird Science in 1950s America. This book seems to go in a million different directions at once. It's interesting. I'm not entirely convinced by the connections it draws. It seems to connect just about everything that happened in the 1950s. But there's some interesting information in there. An original science fiction anthology edited by Peter Weston, and this is Andromeda 1. It's seen better days. This is an ex-library copy, but there's some interesting authors in here. Michael G. Coney, Brian Aldiss, Robert Holstock, Christopher Priest, George R.R. Martin, Harlan Ellison, Andrew Stevenson, and Terry Greenhow. Oh, and Bob Shaw as well. So, yeah, there's late 70s, mid to late 70s science fiction. So, I don't think I could be going far wrong with that roster of authors. The Folk of the Air by Peter S. Beagle, he of The Last Unicorn fame. And this is a novel from 1986-87, part of it based on a story he wrote in the 70s. During Rocket Summer, back in July, I read Voices from the Radium Age. Here is more Voices from the Radium Age, so another science fiction anthology with some surprising names in there. So you have H.G. Wells, you have Abraham Merritt, you have Algernon Blackwood, but you also have George Allen England and Booth Tarkington. So a good old mix of science fiction authors, weird authors, and authors who were just turning their hand to a little bit of science fiction. And I think first edition from Paul Anderson, Operation Chaos, Doubleday Science Fiction. And to finish today, running through what I think might be all, hopefully all, of my Science Fiction Book Club and Readers Union science fiction books. These are possibly not the best known science fiction titles, but they're known authors. So it's intriguing for me to read some perhaps of their lesser known works. But I do warn you, the covers for these are nothing to write home about. And I think it's possibly the covers that means that these are not collectible books, because in every other respect, they hold up well, they're hardback, but Christ, they look dull. Tin Woodman by David Bischoff and Dennis Bailey. October the 1st is Too Late by Fred Hoyle. The Ice People by René Barjavel. Time Scoop by John Brunner. The Inferno by Fred and Jeffrey Hoyle. Candyman by Vincent King. Interface by Mark Adlard. The Overman Culture by Edmund Cooper, Extro by Alfred Bester, Friends Come in Boxes by Michael G. Coney, The God Machine by William John Watkins, The Stone That Never Came Down by John Brunner, Tiger by the Tail by Alan E. Nourse, In Deep by Damon Knight, Time in Advance by William Tenn, Pilgrimage by Zena Henderson, The Uncensored Man by Arthur Sellings, The Pollinators of Eden by John Boyd, and finally The Saliva Tree by Brian Aldiss. So that's it for this week. That was Shelf Cubicle 8, which I think means that we're about a third of the way through now. So if you stuck with it, thank you for doing so. Next week, as you'd expect, Shelf 9. Until then,